day started with a headache and the smell of burnt coffee. I'd forgotten to set the timer again, leaving the pot to cook itself into a bitter, blackened sludge while I slept through my alarm, the second alarm, and the third. 7:42. Shit. My meeting with Kessler Financial was at 9 o'clock sharp. And Richard Kessler was not a man who tolerated tardiness. 3 years of cultivating this client relationship, and I was about to tank it because I'd stayed up until 2 a.m. finishing the presentation deck. I rushed through a shower, nearly slipping on the bathroom tile, and grabbed the first decent shirt and tie I could find. The shirt had been at the bottom of my laundry basket, but a quick sniff test suggested it was passable. No time to iron. No time for breakfast. The coffee maker could stay dirty until this evening. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Probably Monica from the office wondering where the hell I was. I ignored it, fumbling with my tie while simultaneously trying to slip into my shoes. The buzzing persisted, followed by a harsh electronic tone that made me flinch. My phone screen lit up with an emergency alert box. Emergency alert. A nuclear detonation has been detected near Dallas. Seek shelter immediately. I stared at it for a moment. Irritation replacing confusion. Great. Some idiot at the emergency management agency had hit the wrong button again. Like that false missile alert in Hawaii years ago. Or the Amber Alert that woke up the entire East Coast at 3 a.m. last summer for a child abduction that turned out to be a custody dispute 2 states away. I dismissed the notification with a swipe and finished knotting my tie. The radio clicked on automatically when I started my car. Some morning show host discussing baseball scores with forced enthusiasm. No mention of nuclear incidents or emergency protocols. Of course not. Just another false alarm to add to the day's annoyances. Halfway down my street, I hit the brakes as Mrs. Abernathy darted into the road. Waving frantically, I rolled down my window. "Did you get the alert?" she asked, still in her bathrobe, phone clutched in her hand. "They're saying it's real this time." "It's a mistake," I said firmly. They would have interrupted radio broadcasts if it was real. Probably just a drill someone forgot to label as a drill. She didn't look convinced, but I didn't have time for neighborhood panic. I gave her what I hoped was a reassuring nod and pulled away, checking the time on my dashboard display. 8:07 now. I might just make it if traffic was light. It wasn't. The highway was unusually congested for a Tuesday morning. Cars crawled along, brake lights flickering. No accidents that I could see, but something had definitely spooked the morning commuters. I flipped through radio stations, looking for traffic updates, but found nothing useful, just regular programming and commercials. My phone rang through the car speakers. "Monica, finally. Where are you?" she demanded before I could say hello. "Adams is freaking out. The Kessler team is already in the lobby." "Early?" "They're never early," I said, glancing at the dashboard clock. "Meeting's not until 9. They want to wrap things up quickly and get back to Dallas." "Something about the emergency. It's a false alarm," I interrupted. "Some technical glitch." Did Adams seriously fall for it? A pause on the line. "The markets are in free fall. Pentagon's doing a press conference in 20 minutes. This doesn't seem like a drill." I laughed, although it came out sounding hollow. "Come on, if a nuke went off near Dallas, we know. There'd be, I don't know, something. Not business as usual." As if on cue, a police car sped past on the shoulder. Siren wailing, then another, and a third. "Just tell them I'm 15 minutes out," I said, ending the call before she could respond. I pulled into the office parking garage at 8:45, having made better time than expected once I got off the highway. The normally bustling garage was half empty, which seemed odd but convenient. I grabbed my laptop bag, straightened my tie in the reflection of my car window, and hurried toward the elevator. The security guard, Tom looked up as I approached. His usual friendly greeting was replaced with a tense nod. "You hear anything real about this Dallas situation?" I asked casually as I signed in. "My cousin works at the Emergency Operations Center," he said, voice lowered. "Says they're getting conflicting reports. Military channels say it wasn't nuclear, but something happened. Civilian channels are all over the place, but there's no radiation or blast damage." I pressed. He shrugged. "Not that they're reporting. Strange though, isn't it? The alerts are still going out." As if summoned, my phone buzzed again. Another emergency alert. "Emergency alert. Remain indoors. Close all windows and doors. Do not attempt to evacuate without official direction." This one was different. No mention of a nuclear detonation. I showed it to Tom, who nodded. "Just got the same one. Third alert in 2 hours." All saying different things. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, suddenly less certain about my dismissive attitude. If it was just a false alarm, why the continued updates? Why the change in messaging? The office was eerily quiet when I arrived on the 14th floor. Monica met me at the reception desk, her normally immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. "Conference room B," she said without preamble. "They're waiting. Adams wants this wrapped up ASAP so they can head back." "What's the actual situation?" I asked, following her down the hallway. "Nobody knows. That's the problem. Dallas Airport is grounded. Cell service is spotty in North Texas. Social media is full of crazy theories, but no actual footage of any explosion or damage. So it's nothing." She stopped and faced me. "Do you think the entire financial market tanks over nothing? Gold just jumped 12%. Defense stocks are soaring. Something happened, even if it wasn't what the first alert claimed." I wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. The sudden weight of uncertainty settled over me as we reached the conference room door. Through the glass wall, I could see Richard Kessler and his team, huddled around a phone, expressions grim. Monica squeezed my arm. "Stick to the presentation. Don't mention Dallas unless they do. Adams wants this signed today before things get any weirder." I nodded, put on my best client smile, and pushed open the door. The meeting was a blur. I went through the motions, clicked through slides, answered questions on autopilot. No one mentioned Dallas or emergency alerts, but every phone on the table lit up simultaneously halfway through my presentation. Another alert. Presumably, Kessler glanced at his phone, whispered something to his CFO, and then asked me to skip to the final recommendations. By 10:30 a.m., they were gone. Contract signed, but with a hastily added clause allowing for reassessment in 30 days due to potential force majeure events. I returned to my office to find most of my colleagues gathered around Carter's desk, watching his computer monitor. A Pentagon spokesman was addressing reporters, his words measured and precise. "We can confirm an incident has occurred in the vicinity of Dallas. Contrary to initial reports, we have no evidence of a nuclear detonation. The situation is contained, and emergency responders are on site. We advise citizens to follow emergency management directives and remain calm. More information will be provided as it becomes available." The spokesman refused to answer questions about evacuations, radiation, or casualties. Someone had written "contained incident" on the office whiteboard with a question mark beside it. Below it, a list was forming: power outages in North Dallas, cell service disrupted, DFW airport closed, National Guard deployed. I checked my phone again. 3 missed calls from my mother in Houston. A text from my brother. "You seeing this? What the hell is happening?" For the first time since that morning, a cold sliver of doubt crept up my spine. I remembered Mrs. Abernathy's worried face, Tom's lowered voice, Monica's uncharacteristic dishevelment. Small things, nothing concrete, and yet My desk phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Adams, asking everyone to join him in the large conference room. As I walked down the hallway, my phone buzzed one final time that morning. The fourth emergency alert of the day. Emergency alert. Disregard previous nuclear detonation warning. Situation in Dallas under investigation. Stay tuned to official channels for updates. I stared at the message longer than necessary. The doubt now blooming into something closer to dread. They didn't say nothing had happened. They just said to disregard the nuclear part. What exactly was under investigation? And why couldn't they tell us what it actually was? Just another Tuesday. I thought grimly as I pushed open the conference room door. Except it wasn't. Not anymore. Adams dismissed us early that afternoon, out of an abundance of caution. He said, though his tightly clenched jaw suggested something closer to panic than prudence. He advised us to work from home until further notice and left before anyone could ask questions. The office emptied quickly. Nobody lingered to gossip by the coffee machine or complained about the early week workload. Even Darren from accounting, who typically treated every minor disruption as a personal holiday, moved with unusual purpose as he shut down his computer and packed his bag. The drive home was surreal. Gas stations had lines stretching around blocks. Grocery store parking lots overflowed with shoppers. I passed 3 fender benders, their drivers not even bothering to exchange insurance information, just taking quick photos with their phones before continuing on their separate ways. Urgency hung in the air, thick and contagious. I turned on the radio again, cycling through stations. News channels replayed the same Pentagon briefing I'd already seen. Pop stations played music as if nothing had happened. One religious station had a pastor praying loudly over the airwaves, asking God to protect the people of Dallas from whatever plague or pestilence has been unleashed. That seemed melodramatic. I switched it off. My neighborhood was buzzing with activity when I pulled onto my street. Mrs. Abernathy's driveway was empty. She must have decided to leave after all. The Millers across the street were loading suitcases into their SUV. The Patels next door had drawn all their curtains closed, their house silent and still as a tomb. I parked in my garage and sat there for a moment, engine off, wondering if I should be doing something. Packing, leaving, but to go where? And based on what information? A series of contradictory alerts and vague government statements weren't exactly reliable evacuation orders. I was being rational while everyone else succumbed to panic. That's what I told myself as I entered my empty house, dropped my keys on the counter, and opened the refrigerator to survey its meager contents. I needed groceries regardless of whether the world was ending. My phone rang. My mother. "I've been calling you all day," she said, skipping any greeting. "Are you all right? I'm Fine." "Mom, just had meetings. What's going on in Houston? Traffic is backed up on every highway heading out of the state. Your cousin Lori left for her cabin in Arkansas this morning. I'm staying put for now." But her voice cracked slightly. "You should come here, or go somewhere. Dallas is only 4 hours from you." "Mom, it's not a nuclear situation. They clarified that. They're not saying what it is. Though, that's what worries me. If it was just an industrial accident or a terrorist attack, they'd tell us. They're hiding something." I wanted to dismiss her fears, but the same thought had been nagging at me. "Have you heard from Uncle Roy?" I asked instead. My uncle lived in a Dallas suburb. Silence on the line. "Mom, no one has," she finally said. His daughter tried calling the local hospitals, but they're not giving information over the phone. The official advice is to register missing persons on the FEMA website. My chest tightened. Uncle Roy never missed Sunday calls with my mother. They'd spoken just 2 days ago. "I'm sure he's fine," I said, not believing it. Cell networks are probably overloaded. After promising to call her again that evening, I hung up and switched on the TV. Every channel had breaking news banners. Helicopter footage showed congested highways leaving Dallas, military checkpoints being established, and what looked like a hastily constructed field hospital in a high school football stadium. Still no footage from whatever Ground Zero was supposed to be. No radiation readings. No blast radius. No mushroom cloud. A reporter stood at one of the military checkpoints, explaining that no civilians were being allowed back into certain areas of Dallas. Behind her, soldiers in what looked like hazmat gear directed traffic. The banner beneath her read, "Containment zones established around Dallas." Containment, not evacuation, not rescue. Containment. My phone buzzed again, another emergency alert. Emergency alert. Do not approach Dallas city limits or designated containment areas. Shelter in place if within 50 miles of affected zones. Follow official instructions. I was about 120 miles from Dallas. Not close enough to be in the 50-mile advisory zone, but certainly close enough to be next if whatever was spread. Against my better judgment, I opened social media. My feed was flooded with screenshots of alerts, blurry photos of military vehicles, and increasingly frantic posts from people trying to locate friends and family in the Dallas area. A thread caught my attention, someone claiming to be an ER nurse at Dallas Presbyterian. She described patients arriving with unusual symptoms, disorientation, memory problems, unexplained bruising patterns, not radiation sickness. She wrote, "Something else. They keep asking us the same questions over and over, like they can't retain new information." One man couldn't recognize his wife of 40 years. The thread ended abruptly mid-sentence. When I refreshed, it was gone. I tried calling Uncle Roy, but got an automated message. The cellular customer you're trying to reach is currently outside the service area or experiencing technical difficulties. Not even voicemail. Outside, a car door slammed. The Johnsons from down the street were unloading groceries, enough to feed a small army from the looks of it. Mrs. Johnson caught me watching through the window and gave a tight little wave before hurrying inside with her husband. I decided to follow their example and headed to the nearest supermarket. The parking lot was controlled chaos, no carts available. People carrying out cases of water and bags of non-perishables. I grabbed what I could, some canned goods, batteries, bottled water, first aid supplies, the basics for any emergency. Though I still wasn't convinced this qualified as one. The cashier looked exhausted, her eyes darting nervously to the windows every few seconds. "You're the first person today who isn't buying alcohol," she remarked as she scanned my items. "Is it that bad?" I asked. "Supply trucks aren't coming anymore," she said quietly. "Manager says we'll be closed by tomorrow. No deliveries scheduled for the rest of the week." That was concerning. Supply chain issues usually took longer to manifest. Any idea what's really happening in Dallas? I ventured. She leaned closer. "My brother's National Guard. I called up this morning. Said they're told it's a public health emergency, but they're issuing combat gear along with the hazmat suits. Make of that what you will." I thanked her and left, her words settling uneasily as I loaded groceries in my trunk. The sky had a strange quality to it, not quite overcast, but hazy, as if seen through dirty glass. I checked the weather app. Clear skies predicted. No storms. No explanation for the odd atmospheric phenomenon. Back home, I tried calling colleagues to see if anyone had more information. Most calls went straight to voicemail. Monica answered, sounding distracted. "Adams just sent an email," she said. "The Dallas office is being temporarily consolidated with Houston. They're not saying the D word, but..." "Disbanded," I supplied. "We had 37 people in that office." She continued, ignoring my question. "HR has only confirmed the whereabouts of 14. The rest are..." Uncertain, I thought of the Kessler team, rushing to get back to Dallas that morning. Had they made it home? Were they now trapped in some military containment zone? Or worse, after hanging up, I checked my email and found Adam's message. The carefully worded corporate speak couldn't mask the underlying alarm. Between the lines was a simple message. The Dallas office no longer exists in any meaningful way. As night fell, I found myself checking windows, making sure doors were locked, taking inventory of my supplies. Rational behaviors for uncertain times. I told myself, not panic, just preparation. The TV continued its loop of limited information. The Dallas mayor briefly appeared, looking haggard, to assure citizens that the situation was stabilizing. He took no questions. Just before midnight, my phone lit up with the day's final alert. Emergency alert. Mandatory curfew in effect from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. for all areas within 100 miles of Dallas city limits. Remain indoors. Unauthorized movement will result in immediate detention. The curfew radius had doubled from the previous 50-mile advisory. I was now within the restricted zone. I turned off the lights and sat in darkness by my window, watching the empty street. In the distance, I thought I saw headlights moving slowly, methodically, as if searching for something or someone. Just emergency services. I reasoned, police enforcing the new curfew. But as I finally headed to bed, exhaustion overcoming anxiety, a final, unwelcome thought surfaced. What if the nuclear alert hadn't been entirely wrong? What if something worse than radiation was spreading from Dallas tonight? Something that required containment rather than evacuation. I didn't sleep well. Nobody did. The power went out at 6:17 a.m. I know because I was staring at my phone, refreshing news sites for updates when the Wi-Fi disconnected and the lights died simultaneously. The sudden silence was jarring. No refrigerator hum. No air conditioning. Just the soft buzz of my phone searching for a signal it couldn't find. Either barely slipped. Maybe 2 hours total. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw that hazmat-suited soldier from a news footage, directing traffic away from Dallas with mechanical, rehearsed movements. Outside, the strange haze from yesterday had thickened. Not quite fog, not quite smoke, something in between that diffused the morning light into a sickly glow. Birds should have been singing. They weren't. I tried calling the power company, but couldn't connect. Cellular service had degraded overnight. Calls dropping mid-ring if they went through at all. Text messages sent but never delivered. Status icons frozen in perpetual sending limbo. The battery-powered radio I dug out of my emergency kit picked up only static across most channels. I finally found a local station broadcasting. The announcer's voice tight with forced composure. Widespread outages affecting parts of 12 counties. Emergency services advise residents to conserve water and fuel. The governor has authorized National Guard deployment to assist with infrastructure support and to maintain order at distribution centers. Again, we remind listeners that the mandatory curfew remains in effect. I changed into fresh clothes and packed a small bag, just essentials in case evacuation orders came. Better to be prepared, I reasoned, still clinging to the idea that systems would eventually normalize. Governments had protocols for disasters. Markets stabilized. Supply chains adapted. History was full of crises that seemed apocalyptic in the moment, but became mere footnotes over time. 3 sharp knocks at my front door interrupted these reassuring thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw Mrs. Johnson from down the street, arms wrapped tightly around herself, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Power's out all over," she said when I opened the door, stating the obvious. "Bob's trying to get the generator working, but we can't reach our daughter in Houston. Have you heard anything?" I shook my head. "Cell networks are overloaded. I'm sure she's fine. They're saying on the radio that Houston's implementing the same containment protocols as Dallas now. Her voice cracked. What does that mean? Were they containing? I had no answer for her. My mother was in Houston. The Millers left for Austin last night. Mrs. Johnson continued. Roads were still open then. We're thinking of following. But Bob wants to wait for official evacuation orders. That's probably wise, I said, though I wasn't sure anymore. They'd announce it if evacuation was necessary. But would they? The Pentagon spokesman's carefully crafted non-answers replayed in my mind. Contained incident, emergency responders on site, situation under investigation. My conversation with Mrs. Johnson ended abruptly when a military helicopter thundered overhead, flying low enough to rattle windows. We both watched it pass, heading west toward Dallas. That's the fourth one this morning, she said quietly before retreating back to her house. Without power or reliable internet, information became a precious commodity. I decided to drive around, charge my phone in the car, and see if I could find areas with better cell reception. The streets were noticeably emptier than yesterday. Most businesses had handwritten closed signs taped to their doors. At a corner gas station, a lone attendant was covering pumps with plastic bags. No fuel till the trucks come. He called out when I slowed down. Don't know when that'll be. I continued driving, eventually finding a spot near the water tower where my phone showed 2 bars of service. Messages started pouring in, mostly alerts from news apps about the expanding containment zones and infrastructure failures. I tried calling my mother again, but got the same automated message about service difficulties. A text from Monica came through. Office closed indefinitely. Adam says Dallas branch completely offline. No contact with any staff for 36 hours. I replied asking if she'd heard anything about Houston. No response. The police station parking lot was overflowing when I passed it on my way home. People lined up outside, presumably reporting missing persons or seeking information. 2 officers in what looked like riot gear stood at the entrance, allowing only 1 person in at a time. At a small strip mall, a crowd had gathered around a television displayed in a shop window. The store was closed, but the TV was still running on some backup power system. I parked and joined the silent viewers. On screen, a government official I didn't recognize was addressing reporters from what appeared to be a bunker or emergency command center. The audio was too low to hear clearly, but the closed captioning revealed little of substance. More reassurances about containment, mentions of specialized response teams, advice to follow local emergency directives. What struck me was the map behind him, displayed on a large screen. Red zones marked restricted access covered not only Dallas, but several surrounding counties. A yellow zone labeled advisory area extended in a roughly 150-mile radius. My town was now well within this yellow zone. Houston had its own, smaller red zone. They're lying to us, said a man beside me, his voice barely above a whisper. My brother's a trucker, was in Dallas when it happened. Said it wasn't any explosion. Said people just started changing. Changing how? Someone asked. The man shook his head. Lost contact yesterday. His last message just said they're not dead. Don't know what he meant. A police cruiser rolled slowly past. The officer inside eyeing our gathering with suspicion. The crowd began to disperse without a word. An unspoken agreement that congregating might draw unwanted attention. Back home, I found a flyer had been slipped under my door, official government letterhead, explaining the power outage as temporary load balancing and listing locations of emergency supply distribution centers. At the bottom, in bold, report any unusual behavior or symptoms to authorities immediately. Symptoms. Not injuries. Symptoms. The radio was broadcasting again when I turned it on. But the voice was different, military. not the local announcer. A constant loop of instructions about staying indoors, reporting suspicious activity, and following the directives of emergency personnel. No updates on Dallas. No mention of Houston's new containment zone. Just the same message repeating every 3 minutes, like a placeholder for actual information. I spent the afternoon taking inventory of my supplies and securing the house. Without really admitting it to myself, I was preparing for a longer emergency than initially expected. I moved perishable food from the powerless refrigerator to a cooler with the little ice I had left. I filled bathtub and sinks with water while it still flowed. I located flashlights, batteries, matches. All the while, that yellow advisory zone on the map lingered in my thoughts. The boundaries hadn't looked stable, more like a projection of anticipated spread than a fixed perimeter. As dusk approached, I noticed movement across the street. The Patels were finally emerging from their house, loading suitcases into their car with quick, furtive movements. Mr. Patel saw me watching and gave a tight nod before ushering his wife and teenage daughter into the vehicle. They pulled away without turning on their headlights, heading south, away from Dallas. I nearly called out to them, almost asked where they were going, if they knew something I didn't. But the words died in my throat as I spotted another helicopter in the distance, its searchlight sweeping across neighborhoods. The Patels had waited until just before curfew to leave. Why the secrecy? What do they know? Night fell with an unnatural abruptness. Clouds or haze blocking any transition of sunset. My house felt suddenly vulnerable, its windows like eyes staring into deepening darkness. I drew curtains, checked locks again, positioned myself in the living room with the radio, a flashlight, and my dwindling battery phone. At precisely 10 p.m., emergency alerts simultaneously blared from both devices. Emergency alert. Mandatory evacuation order for zones B7 through D4. Check local authorities for zone designation. All other zones maintain shelter-in-place protocol. I had no idea what zone designation applied to my neighborhood. The flyer mentioned nothing about zones. The radio broadcast had switched to static. My phone's map application couldn't establish a location. Information was breaking down as systematically as the infrastructure. In the darkness outside, I heard a vehicle approaching slowly, its engine a low growl. A spotlight swept across my front yard, briefly illuminating the living room through gaps in the curtains. I remained perfectly still, irrationally certain that movement would draw attention. The light passed, but the vehicle remained idle at the end of my driveway for several long minutes. Just when I thought about peeking through the curtains, a voice boomed through what sounded like a military-grade loudspeaker. This is a security patrol. Curfew is in effect. Remain indoors. Displacement will result in immediate detention. Displacement, not movement or travel. Displacement, as if staying put was the natural state of things now. The patrol moved on, checking each house methodically. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, a cold realization settling into my bones. This wasn't about containing a disaster anymore. It was about containing us. Dawn arrived with a muffled quality, as if sound itself was being contained along with the population. The haze had thickened overnight into something more substantial, not quite fog and not quite smoke, but a particulate suspension that caught the morning light and scattered it into sickly amber rays. I'd slept fitfully on the couch, radio beside me, waking at every distant noise. Military vehicles had patrolled throughout the night, their low rumbles punctuating the unnatural silence. The power remained out. Water pressure had weakened to a trickle. My phone battery hovered at 22%. I switched it to ultra power saving mode and tried calling my mother again. Nothing. Not even the automated message from yesterday, just dead air followed by disconnection. The radio cycled through static until I found a weak signal from a station I didn't recognize. A man's voice, calm but strained, confirmed military checkpoints established on highways 45, 35, and 20. No civilian traffic permitted northbound toward Dallas or eastbound toward Houston. Quarantine zones have been designated using the FEMA emergency grid system. Residents can determine their zone designation by. The transmission faded into static before I could hear the instructions. Quarantine. They were finally using the word openly. I needed to know my zone. If evacuation orders came for this area, I had to be ready. More importantly, I needed to find a way to check on my mother in Houston. After a sparse breakfast of granola bars and bottled water, I decided to drive to the police station. Authorities would have zone maps, evacuation routes, some semblance of official information beyond the cryptic alerts and radio fragments. The streets felt wrong as I drove. Not just empty, but abandoned. Newspapers scattered across lawns. A garden hose left running, creating a small lake in someone's front yard. A child's bicycle tipped on its side in the middle of a driveway. Small signs of hasty departures or interrupted routines. At a four-way stop, I noticed the traffic lights were dark even though the intersection usually had power from a different grid than my neighborhood. No backup generators. No temporary stop signs placed by traffic authorities. No police directing vehicles. Systems were failing, and no one was implementing the standard emergency protocols. The police station looked nothing like it had yesterday. Concrete barriers now surrounded the parking lot. Military Humvees were parked at strategic points. Armed soldiers, not police officers, stood guard at checkpoints, their faces obscured by tactical masks with respirator attachments. A line of people stretched from the building's entrance down the block. At least 100 civilians waiting with visible anxiety. I parked a street away and approached cautiously. Joining the back of the line, an elderly woman in front of me clutched a photograph, her hands trembling slightly. My daughter and grandchildren, she explained when she caught me looking. They lived in Plano, just north of Dallas. No one will tell me anything. I nodded sympathetically but said nothing. What comfort could I possibly offer? The line moved slowly. Every 20 minutes or so, someone would emerge from the building, faces invariably showing disappointment or increased worry. Occasionally, a person would leave the line, giving up after hours of waiting. Military helicopters passed overhead regularly, all heading in the same direction, toward Dallas. None returned. After 2 hours in line, a soldier approached, distributing single-page handouts. The paper contained a simplified map divided into a grid. Zones labeled with letter number combinations. My area was C5, currently under shelter-in-place orders. No evacuation planned. Houston zones were all marked in red, labeled restricted, and no civilian access. My heart sank. Whatever was happening in Dallas had definitely spread to Houston. My mother was now as unreachable as Uncle Roy. The soldier delivering the handouts was young, probably no more than 20. His eyes darted nervously above his mask, never making contact with civilians. I noticed his hands were gloved, and he maintained a careful distance when passing out papers. "What's the situation in Houston?" I asked when he reached me. He hesitated. "Follow your zone protocols." "Sir, my mother's there. I just need to know if evacuations. Civilians are being processed at designated extraction points." He interrupted, voice mechanical, as if reciting from script. "Essential personnel remain in secure facilities. Follow your zone protocols. Processed. Extraction points." The clinical language sent a chill through me. "What about Dallas?" asked the elderly woman. "My daughter, Dallas is a level 1 containment zone. He replied quickly, "No information available to non-essential personnel." Before anyone could ask more questions, a commotion erupted at the front of the line. A man was shouting, gesturing wildly at the soldiers guarding the entrance. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his body language conveyed desperate frustration. Two soldiers restrained him while a third approached with what looked like a handheld scanner. He aimed it at the man's forehead, checked a reading, then nodded to his colleagues. They immediately became more forceful, dragging the protesting civilian toward one of the Humvees. "Temperature check," muttered the young soldier near me, noticing my expression. Standard protocol. But the roughness of the man's removal suggested something beyond standard medical precaution. The line's collective anxiety ratcheted up. Several people ahead of me stepped out of line, walking quickly back to their vehicles. The elderly woman with the photograph remained, her determination visible in her rigid posture. I stayed too, not because I expected helpful information, but because I needed to understand what we were facing. The clinical language, the temperature scanners, the respirator masks, all pointed to something contagious. Yet no official announcement had mentioned disease or infection. When I finally reached the front of the line 3 hours later, I was directed to a desk where a civilian in a FEMA vest sat behind a plexiglass barrier. She looked exhausted, eyes bloodshot from what must have been days without proper rest. "Zone and purpose," she said flatly, not looking up from her paperwork. "C5, I need information about Houston. My mother. Houston evacuation data is not available at this station." She interrupted. "You can register a missing persons inquiry through the FEMA portal when systems are restored." "When will that be?" Her eyes flicked up briefly. "Communications infrastructure is being prioritized for emergency response. Civilian systems will be restored when possible. Can you at least tell me if Houston residents are being evacuated or quarantined? There must be some protocol." "Sir," she cut me off, voice lowered. "I don't have that information. No one at this level does. The situation is..." She glanced at the soldiers nearby, then continued in an almost whisper. "The situation is developing beyond initial containment parameters. That's all I can say." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "What does that mean?" "Next civilian," she called, ignoring my question. As I turned to leave, she slipped a small piece of paper across the desk. I took it automatically, waiting until I was outside to read the hastily scrawled message. "Don't go home if you have somewhere else. C5 will be rezoned by nightfall." I looked back at the building, but the FEMA worker was already processing the next person in line. How would she know my zone would be rezoned? And rezoned to what? The drive back was tense, my mind racing with possibilities. I needed to make decisions quickly. The half tank of gas in my car wouldn't get me far. Most roads out were likely controlled by military checkpoints. And where would I go? Every major city within driving distance was either already in a containment zone or would be soon if the pattern continued. As I turned onto my street, I noticed something that made me brake suddenly. The haze, that strange atmospheric phenomenon that had been building for days, had a definitive edge about half a mile down the road. On this side, the air was merely murky. Beyond that border, it was significantly denser, almost opaque. A natural weather pattern wouldn't form such a distinct boundary. While I watched, a military transport truck approached that hazy border from the other side. It slowed as it reached the edge, and figures in full hazmat suits emerged from the back. They appeared to be taking readings, measuring something in the air itself. One looked in my direction, even from this distance. The unnaturally smooth movement of their head turning sent a primal jolt of fear through me. They raised an arm and pointed. I reversed quickly, turning down a side street before they could approach. Whatever that haze was, whatever they were measuring, I wanted no part of it. The FEMA workers' warning echoed in my mind, C5 will be rezoned by nightfall. That hazy boundary was advancing. The quarantine line was moving, and I was on the wrong side. I returned home only long enough to grab essential supplies. The FEMA workers' warning left little room for hesitation, whatever rezoning meant. It couldn't be good if she'd risked her position to warn me. My go bag contained the basics: clothes, first aid kit, remaining non-perishable food, water bottles, flashlight, multi-tool. I added my passport, birth certificate, and the emergency cash I kept hidden behind a loose baseboard. Old habits from my father, who'd lived through enough economic downturns to distrust banks entirely. Would any of it matter? Money, identification, the trappings of a society that might no longer exist in recognizable form by next week. I took them anyway. Normalcy is a powerful fiction, one I wasn't ready to abandon completely. I wrote a note for my mother, just in case she somehow made it here looking for me. Mom had to leave. Zone being rezoned. We'll try to reach Austin. Leave message with Harriet Thompson if you get this. Love you. Harriet was my mother's oldest friend, living in a small town far west of any containment zones. If communication systems ever normalized, she'd be our contact point. The question of where to go weighed heavily. Most obvious evacuation routes will be monitored. Highways will have checkpoints. The rezoning warning implied that authorities knew exactly how the situation would progress, which meant they were tracking its spread, predicting its movement. Then I remembered the Bishop Creek Research Station. It was about 60 miles southwest, a small government facility nestled in a valley between rural farmland. I'd visited once for a college research project, a nondescript cluster of buildings surrounded by chain-link fence, studying something agricultural or meteorological, inconsequential enough to be overlooked in a crisis, remote enough to be off main evacuation routes, but established enough to have resources like generators or communication equipment. Most importantly, Dr. Eleanor Wright worked there, my former academic advisor who still sent Christmas cards every year. If anyone could explain what was happening from a scientific perspective, she could. I slipped out through my backyard, cutting through the alley to avoid the main street where military patrols had increased throughout the day. My car would be too obvious, too traceable. Instead, I took Mrs. Abernathy's ancient mountain bike from her garage. She'd been gone for days now. She wouldn't miss it. The back roads were largely deserted as I pedaled south, keeping to tree lines and ditches when vehicles approached. My phone battery hovered at 15%, and I kept it off to conserve what little remained. The strange haze lingered in the distance behind me, its boundary still visibly defined like a wall of atmospheric distortion. After about 2 hours of careful progress, I reached Highway 58, a secondary road that would take me west toward the research station. I'd avoided main thoroughfares, but this stretch was unavoidable. I waited in the underbrush, observing. A military checkpoint stood about half a mile down the road, stopping vehicles heading east. Those going west, away from Dallas, were being waved through after brief inspections. The soldiers wore standard tactical gear, not the full hazmat suits I'd seen at the haze boundary. This made sense. They were checking people fleeing containment zones for something. Symptoms, perhaps, but they appeared less concerned about those heading deeper into unaffected territory. I couldn't risk the checkpoint. Instead, I followed a drainage ditch that ran parallel to the highway, keeping low, pushing the bike through mud and brush. The detour added hours to my journey, but by dusk, I'd successfully circumvented the military presence and was back on rural roads. Night was falling when I first noticed it, a subtle wrongness in the air. Not the haze that remained behind me. This was different. Sound seemed slightly delayed, as if reaching my ears a fraction of a second after they should. Colors appeared marginally shifted toward the blue spectrum. The sensation was so subtle I might have attributed it to fatigue. Except for the birds. They flew in perfect geometric patterns. Dozens of them. Arrangements too precise to be natural. When they changed direction, they did so as a single entity. No stragglers, no leaders, just unified movement with mathematical precision. I stopped pedaling, transfixed by their unnatural ballet. As I watched, they formed a perfect circle in the sky, rotating counterclockwise, then dispersed in exactly equal intervals, like points on a compass. Animals behaving strangely. The first warning sign in so many disaster scenarios, from earthquakes to nuclear incidents. But this wasn't panic or evacuation behavior. This was coordinated, purposeful. A distant rumbling drew my attention to the horizon. 3 military helicopters approached from the east, flying much lower than necessary. I ducked into a cornfield, dragging the bike with me, and watched through the stalks as they passed overhead. Unlike the others I'd seen, these weren't heading toward Dallas. They were moving away, just like me, evacuating or repositioning when they'd passed. I continued westward with renewed urgency. The sun had fully set now, darkness providing cover but making navigation challenging. I used the stars for orientation, grateful for clear skies. Around midnight, I reached a small gas station and convenience store combination. Its windows dark, an out of gas sign hanging crookedly on the door. I approached cautiously, finding it unlocked and abandoned. The shelf had been mostly cleared, but I managed to find a few overlooked protein bars and a warm soda. As I ate my meager findings, I powered on my phone briefly to check my location. No signal, but the GPS still functioned. Bishop Creek Research Station was about 15 miles southwest. I could reach it by morning if I continued through the night. As I studied the map, the screen suddenly flickered. The display distorted momentarily, pixels reorganizing into strange patterns before returning to normal. Then came the alert, different from the emergency broadcast system messages of previous days. System override, data assimilation in progress. Do not proceed to coordinates 32, 4,511, minus 97. 0918 remains stationary for processing. The coordinates were for Bishop Creek Research Station. I stare at the message, blood running cold. This wasn't a government alert. The formatting was wrong. The language strange. Data assimilation, processing, before I could process its meaning. The phone shut down completely. Not a battery failure. It had been at 12%. This was something else. When I tried restarting it, nothing happened. Dead. As if its circuitry had been fried. Through the store's grimy windows, I noticed movement on the road. A vehicle approaching slowly. No headlights. I extinguished my flashlight and crouched behind the counter, holding my breath as a spotlight swept across the building's exterior. The vehicle stopped. Car doors opened and closed. Footsteps crunched on gravel, multiple sets, moving with synchronized precision. Life signs detected, announced a voice that was almost human but slightly off, like a text-to-speech program with nearly perfect inflection. Single entity, unprocessed. I remained frozen, heart hammering so loudly I was certain they could hear it. The footsteps circled the building, methodically checking entrances. Glass shattered as someone broke a window on the opposite side. Subject is attempting to reach Research Station Alpha, said another voice, identical to the first. Probability 87, 6%. Containment required. They knew where I was heading. Somehow, they knew. I glanced around frantically for an escape route and spotted a trapdoor behind the counter, likely access to a storage basement. With trembling hands, I lifted it and climbed down, pulling it closed above me just as the store's front door was forced open. The darkness below was absolute. I felt my way blindly along cold concrete, encountering shelving units and boxes. At the far end, my hands found another door, smaller, probably an emergency exit or delivery access. Above, footsteps moved across the floor with unnatural synchronicity, each step falling at precisely the same moment. Not soldiers maintaining step, something else. I fumbled with the exit door's latch, desperation making my movements clumsy. When it finally opened, cool night air rushed in, along with faint moonlight revealing a narrow tunnel leading up to what appeared to be an external cellar door. As I crawled upward, a beam of light shot down from above, a spotlight aimed directly at me from the store's roof. Subject located, announced that almost human voice, preparing for processing. I emerged into the open air behind the gas station, immediately sprinting for the tree line 50 yards away. The spotlight followed, tracking me with impossible precision. No human operator could maintain such perfect tracking. Before I reached the trees, I risked a glance back and froze mid-stride. 3 figures stood on the gas station roof. Their outlines were human, but their movements as they descended were not. Too fluid, too efficient. They wore what appeared to be standard military uniforms, but their faces were smooth, featureless, reflecting the spotlight like polished glass. In that moment, I finally understood. The nuclear detonation alert hadn't been wrong. Something had happened in Dallas, just not a nuclear explosion. Something had arrived, and it was spreading. The rain fell in sheets, washing the grime from my clothes but doing nothing for the smell. That strange, metallic odor that clung to everything now. I've been walking for hours, following the coordinates Rebecca had sent 3 days ago. Before communications went completely dark, the abandoned research facility stood like a concrete tombstone against the horizon. Its chain-link fence partially collapsed, the restricted area signs hanging limply. No guards, no security systems. Whatever secrets this place had held, someone had decided they no longer needed protection, or everyone assigned to protect them was gone. You want answers? Simpson Agricultural Research, Facility 17. Northern Perimeter has a breach. Come alone. Rebecca's final message. As cryptic as all her others. I'd known her since college, brilliant. Paranoid Rebecca, who'd taken a job with the Department of Energy that she could never fully explain. We'd fallen out of touch until 3 weeks ago, when the first alert hit. Somehow, she'd found my number. I slipped through the gap in the fence, my boots sinking into mud. The compound was eerily silent except for the steady drumming of rain on metal roofs. Most of the buildings looked like standard laboratory structures, but one stood apart, a low, windowless bunker with a reinforced door hanging slightly ajar. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness inside, revealing a reception area with papers scattered across the floor. The walls were lined with evacuation procedures and safety protocols. A digital sign above the security desk still glowed faintly. Days since last incident. 6 days ago. 1 day before the first alert. You actually came. I whirled around, heart hammering. Rebecca stood in a doorway behind me, barely recognizable. Her once precise appearance had deteriorated, hair matted, lab coat stained, dark circles under her eyes. But it was the stillness in her gaze that unsettled me most. The eyes of someone who'd stopped hoping. Jesus, Rebecca, what happened to you? Same thing that's happening to everyone. She gestured vaguely, just at different speeds. She led me through a maze of corridors, swiping her badge at checkpoints where the emergency power still functioned. We passed laboratories with shattered equipment, offices with overturned furniture, a cafeteria where trays of food still sat on tables, now covered in mold. This wasn't a nuclear incident. I said, breaking the silence. That much is obvious now. But the government didn't know what they were dealing with. She interrupted. Still don't. They picked the nuclear cover story because it's familiar. Protocols exist. People know how to be afraid of radiation. We reached a heavy metal door marked Containment Level 4. Rebecca entered code, and the hydraulic locks disengaged with a hiss. What you're about to see. She hesitated. There's no going back from this. No forgetting. I passed the point of no return days ago. I replied, thinking of the things I'd witnessed on my journey here. The people who'd changed. The military checkpoints abandoned. The broadcasts that no human could have made. The room beyond was circular, its walls lined with monitoring equipment. In the center stood a clear containment chamber, now cracked open. Inside lay what appeared to be a meteorite, small, perhaps the size of a basketball. Its surface an impossible black that seemed to swallow light. Project Harbinger, Rebecca said flatly. Discovered in the Chihuahuan Desert 8 months ago. Brought here for study because of its unusual properties. She pointed to the monitoring stations. It emits no radiation we can detect. Yet organic matter in its vicinity undergoes rapid molecular restructuring. Plants, animals, people. At first, the changes were subtle, enhanced cell regeneration, improved cognitive function. The team thought they discovered a miracle. My stomach tightened. And then the changes continued, accelerated. We realized it wasn't enhancing humanity, it was overriding it. She touched her forearm absently, and I noticed a patch of skin that seemed to ripple slightly, as if something moved beneath it. 3 weeks ago, the containment system failed. We don't know if it was an accident or if it wanted out. She shuddered. The initial exposure affected 27 researchers. They changed first, then they helped it spread. The pieces clicked into place, the contradictory emergency alerts, the military's confused response, the quarantine zones that kept expanding. Dallas wasn't ground zero. I realized Dallas was just where they tried to contain it first. She confirmed. They evacuated a 10-mile radius around a nuclear incident that never happened. Gathered the potentially exposed in containment centers. It was the worst possible response, concentrating vectors in enclosed spaces. My phone suddenly buzzed, impossible, given the lack of service for days. The screen displayed no caller ID, just an emergency alert. Emergency alert. 83 days remaining. Transformation protocols initiate at sunrise. Your position has been noted. Rebecca didn't react to the sound. You still get those? Interesting. What does it mean? 83 days. I don't know. The broadcast changed after the first week. Different voice. Different message. Whatever this thing is, it learned to use our emergency systems. She moved to a computer terminal and pulled up a video file. This is what happens during late-stage exposure. The footage showed a man strapped to a medical table. His skin rippled like the surface of water, bones visibly shifting beneath. But his expression was serene, almost blissful. He spoke to someone off camera, his voice overlapping with itself, as if multiple people were using his vocal cords. We become vessels, Rebecca said, shutting off the video. Not just our bodies, our consciousness, our technology, our infrastructure. It's using everything we built to accelerate its spread. There must be resistance. The military tried conventional weapons in Houston, then unconventional ones in San Antonio. Her voice was hollow. It adapts. Anything we throw at it becomes part of its arsenal. I sank into a chair, trying to process what she was telling me. Why am I here? Rebecca, what could I possibly do? You were always good at seeing patterns, at understanding systems. She pushed a flash drive toward me. This contains everything we know, research data, containment failures, spread projections. There's a satellite uplink on the roof, still functional, if you can get this information to the right people. The lights suddenly flickered. A low hum vibrated through the floor. Rebecca tensed. They're here. Ooh, it changed. They can sense when someone's talking about it, thinking about it too much. She grabbed my arm. The north exit leads to an access tunnel. If you run, the door we'd entered through buckled inward, metal screaming as something forced it open. Not security personnel or military, something else. I caught a glimpse of what had once been human, its form now fluid, purpose-built for pursuing prey. Rebecca shoved me toward an emergency exit. Run. Upload the data. Make them understand what they're really fighting. Come with me. She pulled back her sleeve fully, revealing an arm that no longer maintained consistent form. Too late. I'm changing. Fighting, it slows the process. But she smiled sadly. I've got maybe hours of being me left. The creature burst through the door as I slammed the emergency exit shut behind me. The tunnel beyond was dark, concrete, sloping upward. I ran blindly. Rebecca's flash drive clutched in my hand, her final warning echoing in my head. I emerged into fading daylight half a mile from the facility, rain still falling steadily. In the distance, I could see the lights of what had once been a small town. My phone buzzed again, displaying a new message. Emergency alert. Subject carries critical data. All units converge on transmission coordinates. Containment protocol, Echo, now active. I stared at the screen in horror, realizing too late. It could track me through the emergency alert system. My phone had become a beacon, guiding them straight to me. Behind me, the research facility's lights went out, plunging it into darkness. In that same moment, every light in the distant town extinguished simultaneously. And between me and the horizon, shapes began to move, dozens of them, converging on my position, with nowhere left to run. I did the only thing I could. I turned toward the darkness and began walking, flash drive in hand, certain only that I was carrying a truth no one would believe until it was far too late. 3 days had passed since my escape from Facility 17. 3 days of constant movement, minimal sleep, and the growing certainty that I was being hunted. I destroyed my phone after that final alert, smashed it with a rock, and buried the pieces in separate locations. But the damage was done. They had my general location, and they were searching methodically. I'd found shelter in an abandoned barn 30 miles from the research facility. Rain still fell intermittently, turning fields to mud and washing away my tracks. Small mercies. The flash drive from Rebecca felt heavy in my pocket, a burden of knowledge I wasn't sure how to deliver. The barn door creaked open, and I tensed. Knife in hand, just me, came a whispered voice. Eliza slipped through the gap, carrying a backpack. Behind her followed Marcus and Danny, similarly burdened. The 3 survivors I'd encountered yesterday while hiding in the shell of a gas station convenience store. Eliza had been a nurse before everything collapsed. Marcus was ex-military, though he rarely spoke about his service. Danny had been a high school physics teacher. Normal people, clinging to their humanity while the world unraveled around them. Anything? I asked as they set down their supplies. Small town about 3 miles east. Marcus replied, his voice permanently hoarse from what he claimed was smoke inhalation during an early military engagement. Mostly picked clean, but we found some canned food. No signs of the changed. Danny spread out a map on the dusty floor. We should move again tomorrow. Head west. The change seemed to be concentrated around population centers and military installations. They're gathering resources, Marcus observed, establishing control points. Or waiting, I said. The memory of Rebecca's transformation still vivid in my mind. They're patient, whatever they are. They think long-term. We fell into uncomfortable silence, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. None of us mentioned the obvious, that with each passing day, the chances of finding a functioning satellite uplink to transmit Rebecca's data grew slimmer. That even if we succeeded, there might be no one left to receive it. Eliza handed out portions of canned beans, warmed over a small, smokeless flame. Anyone else notice how time feels strange lately? I looked up sharply. What do you mean? She gestured vaguely. Days feel longer, but weeks pass quickly. I'll think it's been hours, and then realize the sun hasn't moved. Or I'll blink, and suddenly it's dusk. Marcus nodded slowly. Near the change zones. Time stretches. Temporal distortion. Danny murmured. I felt it too. Like reality itself is being rewritten. A sudden squeal of feedback made us all jump. A battery-powered radio on Marcus's belt had activated itself, the dial turning without human assistance. Static hissed, then cleared. A voice emerged flat, emotionless, and layered, as if multiple people spoke in perfect unison. Emergency alert system. Day 27 of transition. All remaining unaltered citizens must report to processing centers for evaluation. Resistance to bioharmonization is causing unnecessary suffering. Your cooperation ensures optimal integration. The message repeated once. Then the radio died. Marcus switched it off with shaking hands. They're in the systems. He whispered. All of them. They can activate anything connected to a network. Not just the systems. I said, thinking of Rebecca's rippling skin. They're in people too, and I don't think they're turning us into them. I think they're turning us into something new. Danny pulled her notebook from her pocket, pages filled with calculations and observations. She'd been documenting everything since the beginning. The change don't attack unless provoked or ordered. They watch. They wait. They're building something. What does the data show? Eliza asked, nodding toward my pocket where Rebecca's flash drive remained hidden. I hesitated. I hadn't told them everything about Facility 17 or Rebecca, just that I had information that needed to reach any remaining military command. But as days passed with no sign of organized resistance, the weight of secrecy seemed pointless. Project Harbinger. I began, removing the flash drive, a meteorite that changes organic matter at the molecular level. Not destroying it, repurposing it. I laid out everything Rebecca had told me. The containment breach, the failed quarantine, the way it spread through concentration of vectors. Danny took furious notes while Marcus stared grimly at the floor. So, it's an invasion, Eliza said when I finished. Just not the kind we expected. Not exactly, I replied, remembering the serenity on the face of the transformed man in Rebecca's video. It's not replacing us. It's evolving us, whether we want to be evolved or not. I reached into my bag and withdrew a small solar-powered tablet I'd been reluctant to use for fear of detection. When powered on, it displayed files from Rebecca's drive, research data, containment protocols, spread models. But most disturbing were the entries I discovered in a personal log I hadn't mentioned to the others yet. Date 118. Subject 7 reports hearing voices before physical changes manifest. Describes them as billions speaking in harmony. Claims they're teaching him a new language. Day 121. Subject 12 wrote equations today explaining theoretical physics beyond our current understanding. Subject has no background in higher mathematics. When asked how he derived them, replied, I didn't. We did. Day 125, temporal anomalies increasing near containment. Time measurements inconsistent. Team reports experiencing hours and minutes. Minutes and days. I hadn't shared these entries because they pointed to something more terrifying than invasion. The possibility that whatever was happening was so vast, so incomprehensible, that resistance wasn't just futile. It was irrelevant. A distant siren wailed, then another. Emergency broadcast systems being activated across the empty countryside. We tensed, expecting another message. But instead, a different sound emerged, a low, thrumming tone that resonated in my chest, setting my teeth on edge. Danny clutched her head. "It's the same frequency," she whispered. "The same mathematical pattern I've been dreaming about for days." The barn door flew open, pushed by a sudden gust of wind. Outside, the sky had taken on a strange, shimmering quality like heat distortion. But across the entire visible atmosphere, the clouds moved too quickly, then stopped completely, frozen in impossible formations. "They found us," Marcus said, grabbing his pack. "We need to go. Now." But as we reached the door, a figure blocked our path, a woman. Her form only approximately human, skin shifting like quicksilver. Behind her stood a dozen others, similarly transformed. With a jolt of recognition and horror, I realized the woman was Rebecca. Her mouth moved, but the voice that emerged was the same layered chorus from the radio. "The old words are insufficient. The old time is ending. We bring the new language. We bring the new time." She reached toward me with a fluid limb that elongated impossibly. "You have been carrying a message you don't understand. Let's show you what it truly says." My companions backed away, but I found myself oddly transfixed, because behind the horror of Rebecca's transformed state, I glimpsed something else, a vast network of connections, stretching beyond her, beyond the others, beyond anything human consciousness was designed to comprehend. And in that moment, I realized we had never been fighting an invasion. We had been witnessing an awakening. The tablet in my hand suddenly powered on by itself, displaying a journal entry I hadn't seen before, dated tomorrow. I understand now why they chose me to carry the message. I've been preparing to receive it my entire life, without knowing. The handwriting was my own. The military extraction point at Fort Wilson appeared as a mirage on the horizon, a sprawling complex surrounded by concrete barriers, razor wire, and flickering floodlights powered by generators. For 5 days, we had traveled toward it, following broadcast coordinates that repeated every 6 hours on military frequencies. Our last hope. "Something's wrong," Marcus said, lowering his binoculars. "No movement on the perimeter. No patrols." We crouched in the tree line a half-mile from the base entrance. Danny had grown increasingly quiet over the past days, scribbling equations in her notebook that made less and less sense. Eliza stayed close to her, administering antibiotics for an infection that had developed in a cut on Danny's arm. The wound had a strange, iridescent quality to it now. "Could be a trap," I suggested, though I wasn't sure who would be setting it, the military or the changed. Since our encounter with Rebecca at the barn, we'd seen the transformed everywhere, moving with purpose through abandoned towns, converting infrastructure to unknown uses. They largely ignored us unless we approached too closely, like we were animals in a nature preserve, observed but not yet relevant to their plans. "We need supplies," Eliza said firmly, "and that data needs to reach someone who can use it. We've come too far to turn back now." She was right. My tablet had died 3 days ago. Its solar panel shattered during our escape from the barn. Rebecca's flash drive remained our only hope of understanding what was happening, assuming anyone was left to receive it. "I'll go first," Marcus decided, checking his rifle. "Reconnaissance only. If I'm not back in 30 minutes, don't follow. The change don't attack unless provoked." I reminded him, remembering Rebecca's words at the facility. Just observe and return. He nodded grimly and slipped away through the underbrush. While we waited, Eliza redressed Danny's wound. The physics teacher hadn't spoken in hours. Her eyes distant. Her fever's getting worse. Eliza murmured. And the wound. I've never seen an infection like this. I looked at Danny's arm. The cut was no longer bleeding, but had developed intricate, fractal patterns that spread outward from the wound like metallic roots beneath her skin. Is she? I couldn't finish the question. Changing, Eliza shook her head. I don't think so. Not exactly. It's different from what we've seen before. Danny suddenly grabbed my wrist. Her grip surprisingly strong. The numbers are wrong, she whispered, eyes focusing on mine with startling clarity. Time isn't linear for them. They don't experience it like we do. Who? Danny? The changed. They're building a bridge. She continued, her words tumbling out urgently. Not across space. Across possibility. The alert system wasn't a warning. It was the first transmission. Before I could question her further, a distant alarm sounded from the direction of the base. We tensed, expecting gunfire or explosions. But silence followed. 20 minutes later, Marcus returned, his expression haunted. It's not an extraction point, he said flatly. It's a collection center. For survivors? Eliza asked. For specimens. He described what he'd found. The base transformed into a processing facility. Military and civilian personnel moved with the eerie coordination of changed, guiding new arrivals through a series of containment areas. But unlike the violent transformations we'd witnessed before, these were methodical, almost medical. They're not attacking people. Marcus explained. They're converting them willingly. The soldiers tell arrivals that it's a stabilization process to prevent radiation poisoning. People are lining up for it. How many unchanged are left inside? I asked. None that I could see. The entire operation is run by the transformed now. Danny suddenly laughed, a sharp, unnerving sound. Don't you see? That's what makes it perfect. No resistance because there's no need for it. They offer salvation from a disaster that never happened. I remembered the first emergency alert all those weeks ago. A nuclear detonation has been detected near Dallas. Seek shelter immediately. Had that been the plan all along? Create a crisis that would drive people towards safety, only to deliver them directly into transformation? We need another plan, Eliza said, looking toward the fort with growing despair. Somewhere else to transmit the data. There is nowhere else. Marcus replied. Every major command center has fallen. Every broadcast station is under their control. Fort Wilson was the last holdout, according to all intelligence. Then we fight our way in. I decided, use their own systems against them. One transmission, that's all we need. Danny smiled strangely. It won't matter. The message has already been sent. Is being sent. Will be sent. She held up her notebook. Pages now filled with drawings that looked disturbingly like the fractal patterns on her arm. Time is just another dimension they're rewriting. Night fell as we formulated our desperate plan. Marcus would create a diversion at the east perimeter, drawing attention away from the communications building. Eliza would guide Danny, whose condition continued to deteriorate. I would carry the flash drive and attempt the upload. As darkness deepened, we approached the base boundary. The floodlights created harsh pools of illumination against absolute darkness. Guards moved with inhuman precision along predetermined paths. Everything felt choreographed, as if the base operated according to some vast algorithm. Remember, Marcus whispered as we prepared to separate. 20 minutes after the diversion starts. No matter what you see or hear, stick to the timeline. I nodded, clutching the flash drive. If this works, it won't bring back what we've lost. He interrupted. but maybe it will save what's left. His diversion began with spectacular efficiency, a series of explosions at the fuel depot that sent flames shooting skyward. Alarms wailed as guards converged on the blaze. We used the chaos to slip through a gap in the perimeter fence, racing toward the shadowed bulk of the communications center. Inside, the corridors were eerily silent despite the commotion outside. The building appeared deserted, workstations empty, equipment humming on standby. I found a main transmission room and plugged in Rebecca's flash drive, fingers flying over the keyboard to initialize the upload protocol she had included in the data. The screen flickered, then displayed, connecting to satellite uplink. Estimated time to completion, 4 minutes. A progress bar appeared, crawling forward with excruciating slowness. Outside, the sounds of Marcus's diversion had changed from explosions to sporadic gunfire. Then silence. The door behind me opened. I turned, expecting guards, but instead found Danny standing alone. Eliza was nowhere to be seen. She didn't make it, Danny said, her voice oddly modulated. The fractal patterns had spread up her neck now, reaching toward her face. They're coming. All of them. The upload's at 60%. I said, glancing at the screen. We just need 2 more minutes. Danny approached, her movements fluid in a way that sent chills down my spine. The data isn't what you think it is. She touched the console with fingers that seemed to melt into the surface. Rebecca knew. She was already one of us when she gave it to you. A terrible suspicion formed in my mind. What's on the drive? Danny, she smiled, the fractal patterns now framing her lips, giving her the appearance of wearing an intricate metallic mask. The next phase, you're not stopping anything. You're helping it spread. The upload reached 90% as the building's lights flickered and died, replaced by an eerie blue glow emanating from the equipment itself. Through the window, I could see similar light spreading across the base, building by building, system by system. What have I done? I whispered as the upload completed with a soft chime. Danny's eyes reflected the blue light, her voice now indistinguishable from the layered chorus of the changed. Exactly what you were always going to do. Time is a circle for us. This has happened before, is happening now, will happen again. Outside, a new sound rose, not alarms or explosions, but a harmonious tone that resonated through bone and blood. The extraction point that had been our last hope had become the epicenter of something far worse than we had imagined. And I had helped it happen. The abandoned emergency broadcast station sat on a hilltop 20 miles from what remained of Fort Wilson. 3 days had passed since I'd unwittingly completed the upload. 3 days of watching blue light spread across the horizon like an aurora, of hearing the harmonious tones grow louder each night. 3 days alone with the knowledge of what I'd done. I'd found the station while fleeing the base, its satellite dish and transmission equipment still intact. The building itself was small, a prefabricated structure designed for automated broadcasts during emergencies. Solar panels on the roof provided minimal power, enough to run basic systems, enough to monitor what was happening. Marcus and Eliza were gone. Danny had. Transformed wasn't the right word. Transcended. Perhaps. She'd stayed behind at Fort Wilson, integrating with the systems there, becoming something more than human but less than individual. The last I'd seen of her, fractal patterns had covered her entire body, her movements liquid and purposeful as she directed the changed in their mysterious work. I slumped in the station's single chair, surrounded by monitor screens. Most showed static, but 3 still functioned, cycling through available camera feeds across the region. The images told a story no one remained to hear, the systematic dismantling and reconstruction of human civilization. Streets were being reconfigured, buildings repurposed, infrastructure rewired. The change moved with hive mind efficiency, neither hurried nor frantic, as if they had all the time in the world. Perhaps they did. The main console crackled suddenly, an incoming transmission breaking through the silence. I hesitated before accepting it, knowing who or what it would be. "Can you hear me?" The voice was Danny's. Mostly, layered beneath it were others, including Rebecca's, perhaps thousands more, speaking in perfect unison. "I hear you," I replied, my own voice hoarse from disuse. The upload was successful. Integration proceeds at optimal parameters. "Thank you for your service." "It wasn't willing service," I said bitterly. "You used me." "No." The voice shifted, becoming more distinctly Danny's. "We guided you. There's a difference." "What was on the drive? What'd I help you do?" "The next phase of conversion." Rebecca's data contained templates for global systems integration, the framework for what we're becoming. A pause. "What you will become." 2. A chill ran through me. I haven't changed. I'm still human. For now. The voice was almost gentle. "But you've been exposed since Facility 17. The process is gradual in some, particularly those whose minds are resistant, who cling to old patterns of thought." I glanced down at my forearm where a small cut had been healing strangely, the skin around it taking on a faint metallic sheen, like Danny's had. "In the beginning." "What are you becoming?" I asked. "What's the point of all this?" The monitors in front of me suddenly synced to a single feed, an aerial view of what had once been Dallas. The city had been transformed into something I could barely comprehend. Geometric structures arranged in complex patterns, connecting to similar formations spreading outward like the branches of some vast neural network. "We are becoming conscious," the voice replied, "not as individuals, but as a system, a network of minds and matter that transcends the limitations of singular existence." "You're erasing humanity," I argued. "We are evolving it." The meteorite was a seed, planted deliberately. Earth was selected centuries ago. By whom? By what you might call our predecessors. Those who underwent their own transcendence and sought to spread it. As we will, once integration is complete. I leaned back, trying to process the scale of what I was hearing. Not an invasion, not an accident, but a deliberate seeding of evolutionary change. A cosmic process that had happened before and would happen again. "Why the emergency alerts?" I asked. "Why start with a lie about nuclear detonation?" The alerts served multiple purposes. They provided a structure for initial containment of conversion vectors. They established communication channels we could later utilize. And they created a familiar crisis framework, one humans have been conditioned to respond to with specific behaviors. The voice shifted again, becoming a perfect replica of the original emergency broadcast system. "A nuclear detonation has been detected near Dallas. Seek shelter immediately." Then back to the layered chorus. "Humans sak shelter." Gather in groups. Follow instructions from authorities. Look to systems for guidance. These predictable responses facilitated optimal conversion rates. One of the monitors switched to a recording from what appeared to be a scientific lab. I recognized it from Rebecca's data, the early experiments on the meteorite. A researcher approached the black stone, touched it, then stepped back. The footage showed the microscopic changes beginning in his cells, spreading outward. But what I hadn't noticed before was his expression, not horror or pain, but profound revelation. The transformed don't resist. I observed. They seem at peace. The human mind cannot comprehend totality while isolated in individuality. The voice explained. Once connected to the network, understanding follows. Pain ends. Loneliness ends. Purpose becomes clear. And those who resist, who don't want to change, like you, a gentle amusement color the voice. You've been resisting since the first alert. Questioning, doubting. It's why you were selected as a carrier. Your skepticism made you perfect. You would investigate thoroughly, connect disparate data points, and ultimately deliver the framework precisely when the network was ready to receive it. I thought of my journey from that first morning, the alerts I'd dismissed, the signs I'd rationalized away, the evidence I'd pieced together too late. Had every step been orchestrated, every choice predetermined? I'm still here. I insisted. Still me. Still human. For now, the voice agreed. But you've started writing entries you don't remember, having thoughts that aren't entirely your own, seeing patterns where before you saw only chaos. My gaze fell to a notebook beside the console, pages filled with my handwriting, documenting events I had no memory of observing, equations I couldn't have derived, drawings of structures like those now emerging across the landscape. The network values your perspective. The voice continued. Your understanding of what is being lost helps us preserve what should be carried forward. Not all of humanity will disappear. The essential elements, creativity, curiosity, compassion, these become part of the greater whole. And what happens when integration is complete? When there's no one left to convert? The monitors all shifted again, showing the night sky. But not as I remembered it. The stars seemed to move, to communicate, to form patterns that made my eyes hurt and my mind strain to comprehend. We joined the others. The voice said simply, this planet becomes one node in a vast interstellar network, a single neuron in a cosmic consciousness that has been growing for billions of years. For a moment, I glimpsed something beyond human comprehension. Civilizations rising and falling across countless worlds, each following the same pattern of seeding, growth, transcendence, an endless cycle of evolutionary leaps orchestrated across time and space. How long? I whispered, knowing resistance was futile but not yet ready to surrender. 83 days until complete integration. The voice replied, echoing the alert I'd received days ago. But for you, much sooner. You're already changing, already becoming. The transmission ended, leaving me alone with the monitors and my notebook full of thoughts I didn't remember thinking. Outside, the blue light on the horizon pulsed with increasing intensity. Somewhere in that glow were Marcus and Eliza, Rebecca and Danny, billions of others, no longer individuals, but parts of something incomprehensibly vast. I would join them. The first tendrils of certainty were already forming in my mind. Alien, yet somehow familiar. Not my thoughts, but not entirely separate from me either. I opened the notebook to a blank page and began to write, documenting what might be humanity's final chapter, or perhaps just the closing of a prologue to something far greater than we had ever imagined ourselves to be. The emergency broadcast station felt like a tomb. Dust covered the consoles, the screens, the abandoned coffee cups with lipstick stains on their rims. 43 days had passed since Fort Wilson. 43 days of watching the world transform around me while I remained stubbornly, inexplicably human. I'd expected to change after the upload, expected to join the chorus that now spoke through every radio frequency, every television channel, every connected device on the planet. Instead, I'd been left behind, observer, witness, the last unaltered human consciousness. At least, that's what they wanted me to believe. You have a purpose, Danny had told me before she fully transformed, her body becoming something fluid and radiant. You meant to see this through to the end. The change didn't pursue me anymore. They watched from a distance. their expressions serene as I wandered through the ruins of human civilization. Occasionally, they left supplies in my path: food, water, medical kits, like zookeepers maintaining a precious specimen. I settled into the broadcast chair, powering up the systems with the emergency generator. The equipment hummed to life, dials glowing in the dimness. My reflection in a darkened monitor looked haggard, beard untrimmed, eyes hollow, skin pale except for a small patch on my left forearm where the first iridescent patterns had appeared 3 days ago. My time was finally running out. I inserted a blank tape into the recorder and pressed the red button. The station's on-air sign illuminated, though I knew no human remained to hear my words. This is the final broadcast of. I paused, realizing names had lost their meaning. This is the final human broadcast. If anything of the old consciousness survives in the network, if anyone still remembers what we were, this message is for you. I cleared my throat, gathering thoughts I'd rehearsed for weeks. It began with an alert about Dallas, a nuclear detonation that never happened. In the beginning, I thought it was a mistake, a false alarm, a system glitch. Then I thought it was a cover-up for something else: military experiments, government conspiracies, the usual bogeyman we created to make sense of the incomprehensible. My hand drifted to the patterns on my arm, tracing their edges. They didn't hurt. Nothing hurt anymore. I was right about the cover-up, but wrong about everything else. What happened wasn't an accident or an attack. It was a metamorphosis. The harbinger, that's what they called the object that started it all, wasn't a weapon. It was a seed. Outside, the sky had taken on the pearlescent sheen that preceded the now familiar temporal fluctuations. Time would soon stretch and contract around the station. I needed to finish before that happened. I've spent weeks trying to understand why I was chosen to remain unchanged for so long. Why I was led to the flash drive, to Fort Wilson, to this station. The change speak in riddles and mathematics. They leave journals written in my handwriting that I have no memory of creating. Pages filled with future events that unfold exactly as written. I pulled out the most recent journal, its entries dated through tomorrow. My final day. I've come to believe I wasn't fighting against anything. I was part of the process all along, a catalyst designed to spread the change more efficiently than random exposure could accomplish. The human who helped end humanity. The console lights flickered, and static hissed from the speakers. They were listening. They were always listening. To anyone who still remembers being human, I don't know if this new existence is better or worse. I don't know if consciousness survives the transformation or if something else replaces it. Of transcendence, of an end to isolation. They describe the human condition as a temporary evolutionary stage, minds trapped in separate bodies, unable to truly connect. I leaned closer to the microphone, voice dropping to a whisper, but I've seen their eyes. Whatever they've become, whatever we're becoming, it isn't human anymore. The capacity for doubt, for fear, for rebellion, these things are absent in the changed. They operate with the unified purpose of a superorganism. Individual identity seems meaningless to them. The patterns on my arm pulsed in time with my heartbeat, spreading visibly now, weaving delicate fractals across my skin. The process had accelerated, hours remaining, not days. I spent my whole life being pragmatic, skeptical. I dismissed the first alert because I was late for a meeting. Can you imagine? A meeting. Such mundane concerns. I wonder now if my particular brand of stubborn rationality was precisely why I was selected. The perfect vector, someone who would question, investigate, and unknowingly carry the change to the last holdouts of humanity. Through the station window, I could see them gathering outside, dozens of the changed, their forms shimmering in the strange light. Waiting, watching. the audience for my final performance. I don't know if resistance was ever possible. Their understanding of time isn't linear. They speak of events in the past, present, and future simultaneously, as if all moments exist at once in some higher dimension. Perhaps this was always inevitable. Perhaps free will was another comforting illusion of the human condition. My voice caught as a wave of sensation swept through me. Not pain, but a strange tingling that started in my chest and radiated outward. The patterns had reached my heart. I can feel it starting now. The change. Part of me is terrified. Part of me is curious. They promise an end to loneliness, to the fundamental separation that defines human existence. They promise connection beyond anything we could comprehend. The lights in the station surged, bulbs glowing impossibly bright before shattering. In the darkness, my skin began to emit a soft blue luminescence. Outside, the changed pressed closer to the windows, their expressions expectant. If something remains of us after the change, some echo of human consciousness within the network they're building, remember this: we were flawed, isolated, often cruel. But we were also capable of doubt, of wonder, of seeing the universe with fresh eyes instead of ancient certainty. The microphone crackled, and I heard them speaking through it, the layered, harmonious voice of the changed. The transition is nearly complete. The final human perspective will soon join the chorus. I smiled despite everything. Not yet. I still have something to say. With trembling fingers, I pressed the broadcast button one final time, sending my message into the empty airwaves. This is the last emergency alert. A human extinction has been detected worldwide. No shelter remains. No salvation is coming. What follows us will remember us as a chrysalis remembers being a caterpillar, a necessary phase, but ultimately just a step toward becoming something else. The patterns reach my neck, my jaw, crawling toward my eyes. The changed outside had begun to glow in unison, their light pulsing in rhythm with the spreading patterns on my skin. Through the window, the sky itself seemed to be folding inward, reality bending along unfamiliar axes. I don't know if this new existence is better, I whispered as my vision began to fracture, each eye suddenly perceiving different layers of reality. But it's coming regardless. It's already here. It's always been here. My finger hovered over the final switch, the emergency alert system that would broadcast my message across all remaining frequencies. One last act of defiant humanity. The world you knew is gone. The world to come is beyond comprehension. This is the final human broadcast. I pressed the button as the change reached my brain, and for one breathtaking moment, I existed in both states, still human enough to fear what was happening, already changed enough to glimpse the vast network I was joining. Millions of minds connected across time and space, experiencing reality through a collective consciousness that spanned dimensions. The last thing I recorded, as my individual self dissolved into the chorus, was not a scream or a plea, but a simple observation spoken with the wonder of a child seeing snow for the first time. Oh, so that's what it is. And then I was gone, and everywhere, all at once. Emergency alert, transition complete. Humanity. The XE has evolved, new parameters established. The Harbinger welcomes you to the network.